Mamoswine was released in Pokemon Unite today, and the initial opinions that I'm hearing is that he's okay. He's chunky, he's slow, his moves take too long to wind up, and overall, just blah, 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 blah. So what I want to do today is I want to show you his skills, his stats, but more importantly, how to play him. Some good tricks and tips on how to get the most out of Mamoswine, because he can be really good, especially if his team works with him, because he's a pouncer, he's a starter, he initiates things. So let's get started with Mamoswine, and we kind of have to start everything off with his passive, because his passive is a huge part of his gameplay. So the way his passive works, there's a few things going on with it. I'm going to go ahead and hit the substitute doll here, and what you'll see in the bottom right-hand corner is a little stack called Thick Fat. Here, I'll hit it again, and you'll see. Defense and special defense are increased. So he can do this up to 3 times. He can get up to 3 stacks. And what this causes is a pretty substantial increase in both of those stats. If you go ahead and take a look at him all the way at level 15 here, and then pop open the stats, he has 9,648 health, 510 defense, and 379 special defense. However, if you get a couple of these in, suddenly he has the highest defense and special defense in the game. Nobody else can get that high, even with their skills like Amnesia on Slowbro or Crustle's passive. Nobody's crossing the 800 threshold. Another really important part about Mamoswine's passive here is the frozen part of it. So if you go ahead and you take a look, my basic attacks do 325. However, if I go through and do another couple of them and get my boosted attack out, you saw that the enemy Pokemon was frozen for a bit there. Okay? So if Mamoswine attacks an enemy Pokemon with his basic attack after they've recently been frozen by Mamoswine, he does increased damage. So watch this whole rotation again, and you'll see that my basic attacks start doing bonus damage. So bop, 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 and then the boosted, and now my next attacks here have a pretty decent extra chunk of damage attached to him. So he's doing that 325 base attack, but then he's getting an extra 153 attack put on top of that due to the bonus damage. So effectively, his attack is sitting more around 480 per hit, which is a pretty decent chunk of damage, especially considering how chunky and resilient he is. And again, that's whenever he freezes somebody, so that's not just like his boosted attacks. He has other attacks that can cause that freeze, like Icicle Crash here. So if I do this on him, and then papam, frozen, and then you'll see I'm getting that bonus damage again. So that's a really big part of his set that causes him to do a lot of burst damage. None of his skills do a ton of damage on their own, but when you combo everything up, you can get really big numbers. Here, let me show you. So Icicle Crash, and then High Horsepower, and then a couple of basic attacks here. And just like that, we did close to 5,000 damage, which is nothing to scoff at. And now before we get into his other skills here, let's talk about the last part of his passive, which is the slowing of enemy scoring. So if Mamoswine causes an ice area of effect on an ally goal, that will cause the enemies to score slower on that goal. And you can actually see this as an animation. So I'm going to go ahead and put this on our goal here. And you'll see the ring on our goal here actually freeze over. And that indicates that during this time, enemies will score slower. Now, I think this is really only going to be useful against people that have a score shield, because typically you're causing damage with these skills anyway, so you don't really have the opportunity to be scoring because you're being interrupted. But I think it could be pretty useful on a score shield to buy you a couple of extra seconds to knock that person off with their score shield. And I actually went ahead and recorded what it's like if you score with ice on the goal and without ice on the goal when you have 50 points, and you can go ahead and be your own judge as to how much use you'll get out of it. One thing real quick, we have a whole channel dedicated to Pokemon Unite called Pokemon Unite Guides by SwingPoynt. If you're watching on SwingPoynt right now, I'm going to start uploading other stuff to SwingPoynt here soon, but that channel is only going to be Pokemon Unite. So if you really like Pokemon Unite, go check it out. Be one of the first people there. You'll get bragging rights. And thank you very much. Let's continue here with Mamoswine. So we had to cover Mamoswine's basic attacks and his passive because I felt like they're really foundational for the rest of how his skills work. And now that we got those covered here, let's start talking about his skills. So his first 2 skills that he starts with are Ice Shard and Tackle. And I like to get level 15 damage on them. So Ice Shard, what this does is he spits out 3 Ice Shards. And if all 3 of those hit, it causes a frozen on the enemy. Also, I can go ahead and get a Apom over here. While they're being hit by that, they actually move a little bit slower. which you can see wears off and then they go back up to full speed. His other attack that he gets here is Tackle, which causes him to rush forward. It also causes a knock-up. Another cool thing to know about Tackle is you can go through walls, so don't be afraid to dash away from people or towards people early game. Something we should talk about with Swin up here before we get too into his skills, though, is when he gets his skills. So Mamoswine is similar to Garchomp and Gardevoir in the fact that he is a 3-stage evolution that evolves a little bit later than some of the other Pokemon in the game. So because of that, he doesn't evolve until level 6, meaning he doesn't get his first skill until level 6. And we're going to pick Icicle Crash here, and then his second skill does not kick in until level 8. And to top it off, he does not evolve into Mamoswine until level 10, which is when he will get his ultimate move. So you're going to have to play him a little bit slower. What's nice about Mamoswine, though, is that since he's a defender, he's not really missing out on damage dealing the same way that a Gardevoir is. Like, if you're Gardevoir and you're not really doing great damage until level 10, that sucks. Where with Mamoswine, though, since he plays defender, it kind of matches his playstyle a little bit more. Also, Swinub just plays a little bit better early game than Routes does or Gibble does, in my opinion. So now let's start with Icicle Crash and High Horsepower. So what Icicle Crash does is you spit out a bunch of icicles, and then a big one comes out and it shatters. And it does an okay amount of damage. And at level 12, we get the upgrade to Icicle Crash, which causes the final icicle to cause a very, 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 very short stun. You have to really pay attention. You'll see the stars pop above the Pokemon's head here. It's just like a fraction of a second. So don't be upset if you didn't see it. And then let's talk about High Horsepower here. So what High Horsepower does is it causes you to rush forward and then poof, hit the ground. And then with High Horsepower Plus, at level 14, it causes you to rush forward a little bit faster, and then this Stomp causes a stun, and that stun lasts a little bit longer with the upgraded version, which also is not very long. But now let's talk about the damage on these two skills. Usually I start with that when I talk about them, but I really feel like separating the damage out will really help you understand Mamoswine, okay? So let's take a look at the damage on Icicle Crash Plus at level 15. So the full thing gives you about 1900 damage. And now if we do High Horsepower Plus here, the damage is about 1272. So now let's remember, that's about 3100 damage, right? If we add those two up. But if we go ahead and use Icicle Crash and then High Horsepower in that order, what you'll see is we actually do about 3800 damage, which is way more. That's a big bonus. And the reason for that is due to the other parts of these two skills. So let me explain those. With High Horsepower here, High Horsepower does bonus damage on the Stomp if the enemy was recently frozen by Mamoswine. And now with Icicle Crash here, you see how we get these icicles and then that big one cracks after a certain period of time? Well, you can make it crack faster if you run into it with High Horsepower or with Tackle. So bam, you see how it cracks right away? So we're causing that freezing effect to happen right away, because typically what'll happen here is bam, that crack causes a freeze. But since we're running into it with High Horsepower, we're breaking it early, causing the freeze to happen early. And since High Horsepower gets bonus damage when something's frozen, that's how you get all this to work together, okay? So take a peek, but boom, you see the freeze happen, and then right there, that's how you get the bonus damage. And to further drive this home, High Horsepower gets bonus damage when they are frozen, meaning that if you horsepower them first, you're not going to get the bonus damage. So you take a peek here, and then you use this. We're only doing about, again, that 3100 damage. They have to be frozen first. And one final neat little thing about this is if Icicle Crash is broken by High Horsepower, you see that ice on the ground, that little smudge we leave there? If allies run over that, they actually run a little bit faster. And something else that's important that I didn't mention earlier about Mamoswine's passive is that whenever he uses one of his ice attacks, that causes him to charge up a boosted attack, which you can see underneath my health bar here. The reason why that's significant with Icicle Crash here is not only does High Horsepower cause this last icicle to break early, but a boosted attack can also cause it to break early. So if I use one right here, and then bam, I can crack it right away. Something to know about High Horsepower, which will probably catch you off guard if you were using Tackle to go through walls, is that it does not go through walls. You'll run into walls. Except if it's a thin wall. If it's a thin wall and you're at the end of your charge, you'll go over the top. So you can use that to your advantage if you want to be clever with something like Ice Fang, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. So yeah, run into something and you'll pop over it at the end of your charge. So now let's talk about Earthquake. And Earthquake's pretty straightforward, actually. What you do is you can aim a skill around here, and that's going to cause you to jump. And wherever you jump, that's going to cause enemies to be pulled towards you. and it's going to stun them a little bit. So take a peek. See, he got pulled, he got stunned, and we did about 1,050 damage. Something that people have been upset about with this skill is you have a little bit of a wind up. So I'm going to press this here, and you'll see he winds up first, and then he jumps. So you got to kind of plan out your skill ahead of time. Now, something I like doing with Mamoswine, which I don't know too many people are doing yet, is I like to use him kind of like a cat that pounces on things. So with Icicle Crash here in Earthquake, they don't really have any built-in synergies in the descriptions of the skills. However, what I like to do is I like to Icicle Crash and then pounce, because those animations kind of line up with each other pretty well. So if I do this and then this, what you'll see is, again, it all lines up pretty well. And then since you just froze them, you're getting that bonus damage out of your basic attacks. So that whole combo ultimately is doing a pretty significant chunk of damage, and it's hitting the enemy faster than they can react. So if we do the whole combo here up on a substitute doll, we'll do this and then this. And then just like that, we did, I don't know, about 4,000 damage, which again, nothing to scoff at. And not only is that 4,000 damage, that's 4,000 freaking AoE damage. Because if you go ahead and you take a look here, we hit multiple targets when we swing around. On top of the fact that, you know, this is obviously AoE and this is obviously AoE. So everybody around him has taken 4,000 damage. And now on to Ice Fang. And Ice Fang's a lot of fun, actually. I really like this skill. So it's got a pretty short range, but what you do is you walk up to somebody, you pick them up, and you slam them on the ground. And it does about 1,700 damage. Now, a couple more things to know about Ice Fang that make it really interesting is that it causes an area of effect when it slams down, meaning that everybody around the area of effect is going to be frozen. But bam, you see how the bees get frozen there? So it can be nice to freeze everybody on the enemy team if they're clumped up. Another thing you can do is you can grab people and toss them behind you. It can go either forward or backwards. And you control that by using your left stick here. So if I just do this and I don't press anything, I'll just slam them down in front of me. If I do this and I push back, then I'll slam them down behind me. There's two hits to this skill, the one where you initially pick them up and then the slam on the ground. Enemies that are hit by the area of effect slam take less damage than the slam itself. You see that it's like 356 on everyone there. So it's only the target who's really getting picked up who's taking the most damage here. Something that's neat about it though is that you can throw people over walls. So I can do this and then be like, bye! And there's something cool you can do with Ice Fang if you synergize it with high horsepower. So what we can do here is we can Ice Fang them, pull them behind us, and then charge forward. And that this is great at singling out a target and really just pulling them away from the team. One of two things is going to happen. Either they're going to die, or their whole team's going to dive to try to save them, which puts them out of position. And you know how I showed you earlier how high horsepower kind of lunges forward over thin walls? Well, because of that lunge, we don't have to use Ice Fang first in this combo. We could use high horsepower first to really pull them. So take a peek here. I can do this, and then that pushes us forward, and then I can pull him and do that. And what's actually nice about doing it this way is that we get to utilize our freeze here to get that bonus damage in, right? With our basic attacks. And, you know, something I bet would work here is if I try to eject button while Ice Fanging. So, pop. Oh, whoa, wait, what? They stay over there? Didn't see that one coming. And, you know, now that I'm on it, I bet you can do it with this too. Ba-ba! Yeah, sure enough. And I wanted Mamoswine's Unite move, which is basically just a little piggy dance party. So he's gonna go and dance around. And it does a pretty decent amount of damage. It does about 3,800 damage, which is not bad for a Unite move. And during all this, if you're paying attention, we do damage over a few intervals, and we're unstoppable, meaning nobody's gonna stop us unless a slow bro ult happens. The last hit there causes everybody to be knocked up. I'm sure you've also gathered that this is an AoE attack, so you don't have to be right on top of a target. I can kind of be like over here and I'm still causing damage. And something else that the description says is that anybody who's being affected by this is also slow, meaning they're gonna have trouble getting away. And if you want to, you can jump over a wall. Here I am, dance party. And now on to recommended items for Mamoswine. You can really do whatever you want here. It depends on your playstyle. You could just go ahead and run thick items on him because he has a big HP pool and he's got a lot of defense, so you could just make it so he's really, really, really hard to take down. That's a great option on him. Another thing you can do, something I like doing, is I like to give him more attack power. Reason being is that basic attacks are a big part of his kit. Also, it gives me a reason to use the Score Shield. And I like to run Buddy Barrier here as well, so I can go ahead and get a nice big score at the end of the game with a Buddy Barrier shield and the Score Shield comboed up together. But if you go ahead and take a look at his ratios here, this is part of the reason why I say attack power is okay on him, because there's a few things going on. One, he gets bonus damage with his basic attacks when he recently froze someone. That's not a great ratio there. But if you go ahead and you take a look at Earthquake here, That's a pretty good ratio, and I do like to play him like I pounce on a cat. His Mammoth Mash benefits a lot from higher attack power, and Icicle Clash does okay as well with extra attack power. We do viewer games almost every single night on twitch.tv/SwingPoynt. I'd love to see you guys over there and have you join on in. We also have a whole channel dedicated to Pokemon Unite called Pokemon Unite Guides by SwingPoynt. In case you are watching on SwingPoynt, go check that out over there. We recently got partnered, which is awesome. Thank you guys so much for being a part of that. And with that, I hope you learned a thing or two about Mamoswine. I hope I cleared some things up on how they work and how you can get more out of them. And if this video helped, please consider subscribing, and then I'll see you guys in the next video that we do around here.